Hello there. This is Jen Grace. I am the host of Purpose Beyond the Page, and I'm here today with Ben Gioia, and we are going to hopefully take a nice meandering journey down the path of authorship. And before we begin, I would love to just kind of set the stage, give a little bit about your background, where you are, who you help, and then we can dive into some good stuff.
That sounds great, very much. So Jen, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So Ben Gioia, influencewithaheart.com. I have a book writing process, and I just officially loudly launched my publishing company, Leadership Awake Press, which I'm really excited about. Thank you very much. And I've been helping folks write and publish their books for about 6 years. Found my way into this work unexpectedly. I mean, I always wanted to write a book since I was about 12 and did a bunch of things in the meanwhile, and had this beautiful opportunity where somebody said, "Hey, you want to do this talk at Stanford?" And I said, "Sure." And I promised to bring books that I hadn't written. And from fulfilling that promise, that basically opened the doors, first of all, to understanding what is possible with a book, so much more than we ever thought before. And number two, the power of deadlines, and how deadlines turned into a wonderful life for me. And I feel like one of the luckiest people to be able to do the work that I'm doing today.
I love that. And your business is Influence with a Heart, which I love that. And that's why we decided to name the episode after Influence with a Heart. And then, the courage to write and lead authentically and intentionally, and all of those great things. So I know that when you and I first connected, we were both like, wow, there's a lot of synergy here in terms of who we help, how we help people. And before we kind of dive into any of that, in my prep for this conversation, even though we've known each other for a while, I started to do my digging around and research, and I came across your story of India. And I know it has like a big transformation for you. However, I stopped myself from reading it or watching or listening to it in advance, so that way I can be here with shock and awe, perhaps, as maybe someone who's watching this or listening to this as well. So can you just kind of give the whatever degree feels comfortable for you rundown of what happened to you in India?
Absolutely. Thank you. So this is actually a story I tell from the stage. I've worked this into a keynote over the years, and it's two stories of India. It was the first time that I was there in 2004, where in the space of about 72 hours, I faced death 4 times. So bus almost going off a mountain road at about 6,000 feet up, and then running from a wildfire, and then encountering a poisonous snake, and then encountering a mountain lion. And after all of that, certainly a few things happened in my brain and my heart. But the biggest one was really that extra galvanization, if I can use that word, around my purpose, right? Really wanting to make a bigger impact, and understanding, being reminded again and again, we never know how long we're here, right? So let's do what we can, while we have the opportunity. So had that first round of India, and in this point in my life, I was at the tail end of a whole bunch of drug use, years of parties and dancing and DJs and all the things, and never thought it was a problem until it became a problem, and then found my way to rock bottom. And as I'm sitting in rock bottom, or at rock bottom, I said, what do I do now? And I was like, I know, I'm going to go back to India.
Oh, because you didn't get enough the first time.
I certainly did not. So I went back and volunteered, lived with a family for about a month in the Himalayas, helping them farm barley. Did a bunch of hiking, and among the hikings, if you will, did a 9-day trek through the mountains, through the Himalayas. And it turned out that I didn't show up to India with new boots, because I was at the tail end of doing drugs and not paying good attention. And that led to the 2 biggest blisters you can imagine on each of my Achilles tendons on day 1 of the 9-day, 6 to 8 hour a day hike over dry riverbeds, over 16,000 foot high passes every other day, with every single step, as you can imagine, being ow, 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 ow.
Yeah.
And plus, the shame and the recrimination, and how could you, and what are you stupid, and all these things. And after all of the, that swirling and that monkey mind, day 6, I'm looking at the Himalayas, and still it hurts like heck. But I'm looking up and I'm like, wow, everything's so beautiful. Why is everything so beautiful? I'm not on drugs. Why is everything so beautiful? And I was like, aha, right? Every painful step was actually pulling me into the present moment. And for the first time in my life, I spent a bunch of time in the present moment.
Mm.
It's like, aha, this is what these guys, well, I should say these teachers, men, women, and beyond have been teaching for millennia, right? And then about 12 years later, after I figured that part out, I figured out the other part, which is essentially what our friend the Buddha teaches, right? That difference between pain and suffering, and that pain is a part of the human experience, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right? Stuff changes, there's going to be pain, but the suffering is optional. Right? We can eliminate, we can reduce the suffering, we can eventually get rid of it completely. And not only that, did that make my life a heck of a lot better. It also helped me to serve my book writing clients much more easily and effectively, because I helped them understand that you don't have to suffer to get a book done.
I love that. And my mind has gone to when we go through something really painful and really hard, and especially when you add physical pain into the mix, because I think that certainly is just a different type of element, right? Like you have emotional, mental, physical, all the different types of pains. Do you think that your experience in kind of going through that for the 9 days makes you look at something like the book writing process differently, because because it's almost like stamina, I feel like, is what's required to get a book written. And in that case, like stamina to be walking for 6 to 8 hours over 9 days with an injury. Like, did that help kind of like, does that kind of come up in your work when you're working with authors in terms of like trying to help them like dig deep and be like, okay, like you can do this. Like if I can do this, you can do this type of mentality?
Absolutely. I will often say, if I could do this, right, you can do this with one arm tied behind your back, right?
Mhm.
Because we all can, or the vast majority of us can. I mean, if you're listening, watching right now, you have the capabilities to do this for sure. And I've also understood over the years, like there is a certain level of stamina, but there's that risk with the word stamina in my experience, and language is tricky at many times, right? But I come from the United States. I grew up in New York. I lived in San Francisco, so a lot of hustle culture and perfectionism and get it done and rocket and all these kinds of things. And for me, that was unsustainable and made me unhappy. So while in my experience with books, yeah, there's stamina, like you got to go to it and get back to it and make it happen. But a lot of the energy ends up coming not from pushing forward, right? But like relaxing forward, if you will, right? And recognizing that the stuff that comes up, the pain, the physical, mental, emotional, monkey mind, imposter syndrome, pretty much anything you can name, right, is ultimately impersonal. I mean, it feels personal as hell, right? But it is an impersonal process. You didn't ask for that itch on your nose, or that terrible feeling of shame or whatever it is. So the relaxing forward in this is to not get involved with whatever that is that's coming up, right?
Mm.
Because people, for decades, if not longer, let me say at least 100 years, they get stuck in whatever comes up because it's so uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? And then they think they can't get it done, or they blame themselves, or they think, oh, you got to become an alcoholic to write a book, all these kinds of things. And it's like, no, there is a different approach. And I'm not saying suddenly tomorrow, if you start taking this different approach, everything's going to change immediately. No, I mean, it is a practice, just like everything else. But to be able to not have to suffer through the experience, makes the stamina sustainable.
I tell people often that the book writing process can actually be enjoyable. Like it is possible. I know that you see different tropes in movies or TV series or things like that, where it's like the recluse that's like locked in the cabin and that's the only way they can write. And it's like that might be a very small percentage of how people actually do this. But the reality is that everyone's figuring out how to fit it into their day to day life. And I love the idea of relaxing forward, because There's so many experts and gurus out there that talk about book writing as this very intense boot camp style, like you can do it in 30 days if and it's not to say that that's not possible and it's not the right approach for certain people. But I think that that's what intimidates the average potential author, is that they're like, well, I don't want to have to be in that, like, being yelled at by the drill sergeant to get it done or to take the next step forward, versus what you're saying, which is kind of like just relaxing into the process. Because the more I think relaxed into the process we are, the more creative we can be, because we're not kind of fighting with ourselves internally over, well, I have to produce X amount of words right now, or I can just sit and let my brain wander and something more creative can come out.
Beautifully said. I often will remind my authors and anybody who will listen, I'll say a light mind is the right mind to write.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. I like that. And so when you think about so you had the experience of Stanford being like, hey, we want you to speak. And then also, oh, hey, you need this book. I have worked with authors where that has absolutely been the motivating catalyst, where it's like, oh, I just sold a speaking engagement. I need 2,000 books by August and it's February and I don't have anything written yet. We absolutely had that scenario a number of years ago and she was able to deliver, but it is definitely not a light mind in those scenarios, because you're kind of like really frenetic and your pace is like, oh, like I'm going to let a lot of people down if I don't accomplish this. So what would you say to somebody who might have some kind of urgency around needing to get their story out, but also wanting to kind of lean into that softer side of just like allowing our mind to like really just be present as much as we can?
Yeah, that's a great question. I often will say, hurry up and get your book done, but don't rush. Right. So whatever consistent, persistent action, in the direction of the book, and also strategic and discerning action, right? Because you can, like anything in life, you can be busy and not get anywhere, right? And you can talk about being busy as the reason why you're not getting somewhere, right? Yeah. But to do it, because if the dream is there, the idea of if something's half written, right? If it was done 3 years ago and it's time to revisit, get it out there, right? There are people waiting for your book, and the book will invariably change your life, even if it's not your first one.
Yeah, I think every book has a purpose, a reason, and a season, right? Every book that we write. My 8th book is coming out on the 17th, and if I look at all of them up until this point, they've all had very different intentions, different purposes, and everyone's kind of writing formula, if they even have one, is unique. And if I look back at how I wrote one book, it was very methodical, where I'm like, all right, I'm going to write, from 8 to 9 in the morning, Monday through Thursday, and Friday I'm going to be a little more loose and just see what happens. Versus now it's almost like I have to have so much of it in my mind that it's just like spilling out of me in order for me to sit down and actually focus. Cause I'm like, I don't want to be wasting time sitting here trying to force something to come out. I want to let it just percolate and simmer. And then, the book that's coming out on the 17th, I started that in the end of January last year, with the end of writing it. So like 12 months fully written and published, which obviously we're a little more efficient because we are a book publishing company. So I feel like, there's that at play, but it's because it was like pouring out of me. So I'm curious, if you think about what your, like either what's happening with your clients, or maybe a book that you are personally working on and maybe out in the near future, like how you kind of see the process shift from kind of like person to person, because everyone's different. Everyone has a different way that works for them. And we know like general techniques as people who work with authors of how to kind of get people across the finish line, but not everything works for everybody. So what does that look like for you?
You're absolutely right. Yeah. So I have a very precise writing process, and it's more like an architecting process around one's book, right? The first step being, don't specifically write stuff, but talk to your ideal clients about the book you're writing, to get clarity and understanding around the focus, around the language, lay the groundwork for that person to become a client before the book is done, right? And use all of that wisdom and understanding to make sure the book is actually going to work. Right. So you get that focus, and then I give folks a blueprint to follow for the book. I literally put this there, put this there, put this there, and we can always move things around later, but there is a important order of presentation of material, just like giving a presentation, right? You don't walk into the room and be like, hey, thanks for being here. Here's step one.
Yeah.
Right? There's a little bit of preamble, and this is why we're here. This is why it's important. This is who I am and why I care, how it's changed me, right? How it's helped my clients. We want to get all of those things, establish the idea, get on the same page, no pun intended, as the reader, right? And establish the author as an expert or an authority in their stuff, right? Super duper important, because they'll be able to bring their teaching across much more effectively when they do all of that. And the interesting reality of the world in these days is that most people don't read the whole book, regardless of the genre, the author, et cetera. And that is not specifically a reflection on the content. Often it's not. This happens with amazing books as well. So for that reason, constructing the book in such a way that accommodates the fact that people might bounce in and bounce out and jump around, right? How do you still provide value? How do you still make people go, oh, wow, I want more, right? How do you still serve, even if you only get one shot at doing so?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you recently started your press, because you've been working with people writing on the writing side for 6 years, and now you can kind of carry the rest in that experience of working with you into the publishing. And there's something so important about the design of books that I think is not often talked about enough. And I had the joy of being at one of our authors launch events this past Saturday, and his book is called Organizing to Win: The Art and Science of Running for Office. And it's a bipartisan book. And the intention behind it is to help people run for local office. It's not, trying to run for Senate. It's nothing. It's like very much like run for your local, zoning committee. And what I loved so much about that, though, is that in the process, there was such intentionality around the design of it to make sure that to exactly your point, if someone, they might be like, ooh, I'm interested in doing this thing. But when they pick up the book, if the book is very dense paragraphs, not a lot of subheadings, that is going to have a significantly higher rate that someone's going to put it down and not pick it back up, versus something that has more spacing, maybe bigger fonts, things that almost feel unconventional or not how books were once done, because we don't have strong attention spans anymore. So it's really important for exactly what you're saying of, to make sure that, if a reader picks it up, they can pick it up and they can put it down. They can, it makes it, smaller sections and more bite-sized. And so I think from a writing standpoint and the design standpoint, both of those things kind of have to coalesce together in order for the reader to get the transformation that we're all hoping happens. And how I'm transformed by a book versus how you're transformed by a book, it's all going to look a little bit different. But as long as the transformation's there, then the author has done their job.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. What about influence with a heart? Why heart-centered? Tell me and tell us more about why that's the leading angle.
Yeah. So many contributing factors. When I first became an entrepreneur, which, God help me, I think is 17 years ago,
Brave.
Wrote my first book and established my first brand. It was marketing with a heart, because I was seeing all of the things, we know and dislike about marketing happening. And I was like, I'm going to write about a book about doing marketing with integrity, and how do you do it from, place of service and win-win-win and all of these kinds of things. So I took that approach, and, in and among unpacking that, unfolding that, figuring out, I was doing a lot of, my own spiritual work, which is primarily meditation, and working a lot with the heart, and love and loving kindness, right, as it were. And I'd been reading a bunch of things. What is it? The Heart Math Institute. If you've ever come across those folks, they talk about the I haven't read it in great depth and done my comparison journal reading, but my understanding is that the electric, for lack of a better term, resonance of one's heart, and how powerful that is in a room of people, right, and how far reaching, and how tuning in more into the heart AKA the intuition,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're much better, more effective decision makers
Mm-hmm.
because we're not being a slave to the mind, right? But using the mind and the brain in service
Mm-hmm.
of, what we want to give, what we want to create, how we want to help,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Marketing with a heart. I
Mm.
feel like it's fun because then you can have anything with a heart. Like
Yes.
it kind of lends itself very nice from a branding standpoint. Very similar with like your purpose. So I publish your purpose. My new book is promote your purpose. We have write your purpose. It's like anything your purpose, like I'm into it. So I
Right.
love that we both have that kind of like easy anchor point from a branding standpoint, which is important, especially as people who are working with authors, right? Like
Yeah.
what we do is a reflection, I think, on what they feel is possible.
Beautifully said. Yep.
Does that feel right for you?
Tremendously. Yeah. I'm going to have to write that down later.
Good thing we're recording.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, so the name of this podcast is Purpose Beyond the Page. So, this could be influencing with a heart beyond the page, just anything that's like beyond the page. So, when you're showing up either in your work from a personal standpoint or your work with clients directly, what does that kind of look like for you of thinking like beyond the page itself?
Yeah. So I often talk about the idea of using one's book, not just the idea, but the practice of using one's book to attract clients and partners and referrals, right? To create impact long before the book is published,
Mhm.
potentially even before the book is finished being written, right? So I've taught my clients how to do this through literally 20-minute conversation, right? 12 questions with their ideal clients.
Mhm.
Like I said before, to get their finger on the pulse around the book, the language, right? What to include, what not to include, make sure it's going to work.
Mhm.
And coming from that place, or orienting in that place, uh, you know, you like you're already starting the flywheel, or whatever analogy you want to use, right?
Mhm.
Getting things cooking. And I've had some beautiful outcomes of clients of mine, right? Somebody getting a 5-figure workshop
Mhm.
from having that conversation, right? Somebody else getting a 6-figure consulting gig, and the list goes on.
Yep.
And we don't always know when and how it's going to happen, right? But the more we engage with people, the more we engage with decision makers, right? Especially in the context of our book, right? Because imagine, I come to you, Jen, and I'm like, hey, Jen, I'd love to ask you some questions about your business so I can maybe sell you something at the end of the conversation, versus, hey, I'm writing a new book about a topic we both care about. Would you be willing to chat with me because I value your perspective?
Yeah.
That's a completely different relationship. And for me, I don't focus on book sales as a strategy. I mean, book sales are lovely, but they're very difficult, very expensive, require a lot of time, money, and energy for most people.
Mhm.
Right? Most people like me and my clients, at least. Right. So I say, hey, would you rather, if you want to make 100,000 bucks, easy example, right? Would you rather sell, you know, 30 to 100,000 books, right? Or develop relationships with 1 to 10 people thanks to your book, and those people can pay you that total $100,000. That sounds more fun, more interesting, faster, easier. And very often, those people who hire us, who invite us in the door, they have networks, they have communities, they are part of organizations, right? The
Yeah.
doors open in much bigger ways thanks to the book, but not because we're trying to sell the book. We're trying to use the book. We are using the book to cultivate trust-based, really high quality relationships.
Yeah, that's really well said. And that's what it's all about when we think about intentionality and clarity. It's really thinking through that longer game. And I don't know about you, but if I get into a conversation with somebody and they lead with, I need to sell 30,000 books in the first 30 days, I'm immediately, you are not my people. And
No.
it's not to say that they are not capable of that, but that's not the type of, because that's not really leading with purpose. It's not focusing on transformation. It's rooted in ego. And it's not to say that we don't have authors that we've worked with who are absolutely capable and have done something like that, but that is not the average author. Like we know the data behind the scenes, like the average book sells a couple hundred copies in its lifetime if you're lucky.
Mhm.
And there's other strategies like you're saying. So for me, I think about like my publisher purpose book, I give it away for free all the time. Like if someone's watching this and they want access, just send me an email. I'll happily give it to you. Because
Mhm.
for me, it's all about getting them into my bigger ecosystem. And once they're in the bigger ecosystem, they can choose, oh, hey, actually, I think Jen and her company might be able to help me. Or they can say, now I have the information I need. I can go off and do this on my own. And whichever happens is a great outcome for me because I didn't write it specifically as a lead generator, lead magnet. However, it does it all day long, right? So it's
Sure.
like when we're really intentional about things like that, then we can be in a much better position to lead with our purpose and our heart and our intentionality versus just, like an assembly line approach. And I think that's why I think you and I have gotten along so well because we're so values aligned and like just even, our processes, even though they look very different, they're still kind of the same core of trying to help people in a very intentional way.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. What else should we talk about? I feel like there's so many, like I have like so many different paths in my brain that I'm like, I want to just still be concise and actually help people because I know we do have people who are watching live, which is always great.
Yep.
So if
Thank you,
actually anyone
everybody.
who is watching live, if you have questions, please pop them in the comments. I'm happy to bring them up. But I'm just curious, like, where's your mind going as we're having this conversation?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So I think we covered the heart and the reasons why quite well,
Hmm.
and I'd love to bring up a couple things around strategies and tactics that are really
Yeah.
important that I think can help people a lot. Because a lot of times there's that, oh, the book is overwhelming and I don't have time, and the million and one reasons not to, and so many misunderstandings about what it takes to actually get a book done,
Hmm.
well, a book that you like, right, in this day and age. And things I like to remind people of, at least I'll speak in terms of my clients and how
Yeah.
I specifically help. I recommend don't make your book more than 25,000 words,
Mhm.
right? 160 pages, right? Because if you're going over 25,000 words, think about a second book rather than jamming it all in the first book,
Mhm.
right? Because one book looks fantastic, more than one book looks exponentially better.
Yeah.
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 So
What okay, so I know you have a number of things, so I want to pause in the list.
please.
What do you do when someone comes to you and they have a manuscript that they've already been working on and it is 60,000, 80,000, 100,000? Like what is your response and how do you kind of like coach them through like, hey, we might be working with a little too much here?
Yep, yep, yep. So I'm pretty direct about it.
Mhm.
I mean, I couch it in a lot of love, but I say, hey, look, um, like let's look really closely at these 70,000 words. Or that's happened twice to me recently. A couple of my clients. Let's look really closely at this and see if this does truly make sense for the book. And because of all of these reasons, is this a really good idea? Right?
Mhm.
Does it make sense to split this book up into two or three or four?
Mhm.
Right? Because sometimes people will show up with the big book and it's like, wait, we can split this into three, and you've basically written a series already.
Mhm.
Right? So those kinds of things, that's a big one. And yeah, there's some of my authors have, will really heed my advice or my recommendations and trim it down.
Mhm.
Right. And some will be like, I got to say all the things, and that's okay. Like I'll
Mhm.
support them in they whatever way they want to go. Right. It's their book.
Mhm.
It's their business. It's the impact they want to make. And
Yeah.
I'm going to give my best advice. And, sometimes I'll be a little extra vocal and I'll be like, hey, you really might not want to do this, or you really might want to do this instead. But either way, ultimately it's their book. And I just want to have the message come forth in the best possible way, whether it's, a series of one, a series of three,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like my preference is always going to be for a shorter book too. I always say 35,000 is a great number. Like we're really close in that. So something that's like under 200 pages. But if I look at the almost 300 books that we've published over the last decade, we have books that are over 400 pages.
Sure.
But they are that way because the audience that they're intended to reach makes sense and will read something that large. So
Yeah.
we really have to pay attention to kind of who's the audience. We did a book years ago that's about chronic disorganization and hoarding and
Mhm.
thinking about like how you support someone in that. a 400-page book would be the absolute last thing that somebody in that position would be looking for. And so it's like 90 pages, right? And
Nice.
so like it's all about like how like making sure that you really know who your audience is. So I love that we're both kind of like, this is my recommendation. However, if you want it to be 90,000, that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with it. We're just trying to guide you into what we think would be more effective. And if you want to overrule that, there's nothing wrong with that. We'll still support you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
Exactly
that.
that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
word count. Okay, that was your first like strategy and tactic. Okay, I love that. Great thing to bring up because a lot of people have no idea what like they have no clue how long a book is or where to start. So we just gave them a nice little frame.
Exactly. It's like, oh, that is totally doable. You can do that. Right?
It is like think about how many words you put into an email in any given week. Like I use Grammarly and it's analyzed like 3 million words since I've been using it. Like it's an ungodly number of words. So yeah, 25,000, 35,000 is actually not that much in the grand scheme of things.
It's really, really not. Yeah. And then another one I like is sometimes people will come and they'll say, oh, I'm not a good writer. And they may not be a good writer, legitimately. Or they might just think that they're not a good writer, whatever the case is. I'll encourage dictation as part of the writing process.
Yeah.
And I remind people that, it doesn't mean you have to dictate the whole book, not at all. But in the space of 5 minutes, you can speak 750 words, and 750 words is 3% of that 25,000 word book.
Yeah.
Right. And if you dictate those 5 minutes 2 or 3 times in a row, by the second or third time, it's pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then you can export that transcript or copy it right into your book document and go do some editing or tweaking from there. But then it's out of the brain, it's out of the head, and it's on the paper.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, there's a piece of the puzzle right there. We can keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you say when someone is listening to this and they say, well, that's cheating? What is your response to that? Dictation is cheating.
I love you very much. You're completely wrong.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's your words, it's your voice. Yep. You're an expert in your stuff. You're teaching, so just teach and let the words come out rather than trying to write, which some people do, and they try to write and they end up sounding like who the hell knows what. Mm-hmm. It's like keep it real, keep it conversational, because the people who are reading your book, they want to know, like, and trust you. Right? They're coming into the book oriented in that direction. Like they want this to be good. They want this to work.
Yeah.
Right. So meet them, make them feel warm and welcome, and teach and transform them.
I love that. Just write the way you speak. Like I think that that was like beaten out of us as young people. Yeah. You have to write in a very specific type of style in school settings. And the reality is that readers are not looking for that. Readers are not looking for academic prose. They are looking for a human to human connection, that someone who's been through the thing that they're trying to solve for themselves. It doesn't have to be complicated. So I love the idea of using narration and transcription for these things, because I remember way back in the day, I had a podcast in like 2012, maybe. I had to actually pay someone to listen to the audio and type out the transcript versus like now, like it is transcribing in real time. Like it is just wild to see just in little over a decade. So the writing process, like there's so many tools, including AI tools, that have a place in this process that can actually help make this faster. So if you have that kind of dream to do this, but have been kind of stuck because you feel like you have to sit in front of a blinking cursor and start on day one or at your birth, like we're already kind of at a disadvantage because it just feels like too overwhelming and too monumental.
Absolutely. Yeah, no need to do that. Especially for these kinds of books.
Yeah, that's why hiring an expert, like this is why we're here doing this, is to help make it shortcuts for people. Okay, I love that one too. All right, strategy 3.
Strategy 3 is leveraging your book cover long before your book is finished being written.
Amen to that. Say more.
Yeah, thank you. So going back to my Stanford story, right, I made the promise to bring the book to Stanford. I had 6.5 weeks to write, produce, print, ship, autograph, show up with the books. So you can imagine I was a little bit busy during that time, because essentially the writing was happening over a 3-week period.
That's insane.
And during that time, I had the presence of mind to step back and say, oh crap, I should get the cover designed and let people know the book is coming. So I got the cover design. I put it up on LinkedIn, and I said, posted it, and I said, hey, celebrate with me. My next book is coming. That's all I said.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I literally didn't have time to say anything else. Right.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, somebody reached out to me and he's like, hey, Ben, I saw your post. I'm a consultant. I'm working on a project. It's a Fortune 100 company, MIT, in a video game studio. We're developing a mindfulness and empathy video game that's going to be played by 20,000 employees at this Fortune 100 company. We saw your book.
Yes.
And in my head, I'm going, you didn't see my book, right? But we saw your book. We'd like you to write the curriculum for the video game. And that turned into 10 months of consulting with a Fortune 100 company.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, of course, right, results vary among all of us, our businesses, us as individuals, our relationships, and the fact that there's a book cover, people perceive you as an author. Heck, you can even start saying, I'm the author of a forthcoming book about X, and people will start perceiving you as an author. So make use of that and get the book done.
Yeah, marketing doesn't start the day it launches. It starts way before that.
Exactly.
I love that. I want to pause because we have a question from Daniel that is, they are asking, is there a standard mathematical formula to rightly price a book? It's interesting.
Goodness gracious, I don't know. I mean, somebody probably made a mathematical formula, right? Because humans tend to do those things. I'm a fan of, for the ebook, Kindle book, $9.99 USD, right? Which is basically I think the top amount, or $10 is the most. So sell the ebook for the most you can.
Mm-hmm.
Print book, I generally like in $19.99, $24.99, depending on the length and the presentation of the book. And then the hardcover, $29.99, $34.99, maybe a little bit more, again, depending on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But to have those tiers, to not overthink it, because the most important thing is going to be what's on the cover of the book and the book description. Right. Because people are making split-second decisions like, am I going to stop here? Am I going to look inside? Am I going to keep reading? Am I going to put it into my basket? Right. It's like step by step by step by step by step. So the a few dollars difference at that point isn't going to make the difference for the kind of people we want to attract to be buying the book.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and I will say that as a process standpoint, we basically have the author as part of the process go out and find the 10 most similar books, and then we do kind of like an average and a mean of, like what people are charging for. And that still doesn't mean, like, you just intuitively, you might say, I need this to be $17.99. Great. As long as it's not like too low, because I think too low is just as dangerous as too high. But, generally, there's really not too much science to it, just making sure you're within the right range of what a customer would expect.
Exactly. Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a fourth strategy before we start wrapping up?
Sure. And this is the extra secret one. Yes. But Jen, I wouldn't be surprised if you were already doing this. Separating the book release, like up for sale, published, the big day, separating that from the bestseller launch by 2 to 4 months.
Say more. I love this. Say more.
Yeah. So many people, they're like, oh my God, my book is out. Here it is. Help me be a bestseller today. And then, all this energy goes into this single activity. And most of my authors, and my own experience too, like by the time I publish the book or we publish one of their books, like we're cooked because we just published a book, right? It's exhausting, right? So I say to people, release the book, take a vacation or at least a long weekend. Then in this subsequent 2 to 4 months, use the book to develop relationships with people, right? Get copies to people, get physical copies in people's hands, get on podcasts, do all of those kinds of things. And then by time, 2 months, 4 months later, whatever it is, you have all this momentum, all these relationships, and then you have another opportunity to yell about your book for a good reason and to get a whole bunch of public participation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot because there are a lot of, systems and programs and people who are doing like promotional things. I don't know if you've connected with Robbie Samuels. We'll give Robbie a shout out. He does these Kindle promotions where he gets, a dozen or so authors together. Sometimes it's more that are kind of around a central theme. And then all of those authors are promoting all of the books that are part of that. And anytime I've participated, my book has gone to a number one spot in that because it's getting visibility from people who are looking for a similar book. So, for someone who might not have a big audience to start with, partnering with someone in a scenario like that where you're paying a small fee in order to kind of get to that status in an authentic way versus because you can hire companies that can get the status for you. How the sausage is made, there's a little behind the scenes to that, but companies do that. And it's a matter of like identifying, like, is that even a goal that is appropriate and makes sense for you? Is that something that you want to be screaming from the rooftops about your book of like, I need this book to be a bestseller? Because sometimes from a values alignment standpoint, it's not really what the author is even looking for. So I love that you're kind of like separating the two because you're right. Like the fatigue sets in. I know I am 14 days out from my book coming out and I am beat. Like I just need it out in the world. Like I've been using it for a long time. Our authors are using it, but like, no, like it's now, finally making it out. And I'm like, I need a break. I am tired. But so if I were trying to do what you're saying of like doing both in the same day, like I know better. Like I just TBD. And I don't even know if I would go for like, I don't even care personally about bestseller status. Like my other books have it. It's just not it's not my leading angle. But for some people it is, and that's okay. Right. Like that's why like our job is to kind of meet people with what their goals are and find a way to make it work for them.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Sausage making behind the scenes, all of that being said,
Yeah.
I like the bestseller launch activity just because it's another public facing activity,
Mhm.
right? I mean, yes, the little bit extra credibility, sure. It's always nice to be able to say, I mean, I still say, I'm a 4-time selling author. Great. I mean, I can always use that. But just that, to have authentic, organic reasons to yell about our book
Yeah.
and where people want to support us, like, happy to buy your book today.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful opportunities in it.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of this. Okay. Do you have any final parting wisdom? I love that you've just gone through these 4 strategies. I think these are all things that you and I probably take for granted, that are probably brand new information for people watching and listening to this, which is really exciting. And I knew that we would have just a good conversation. So any kind of final thoughts for folks?
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, this idea of pain versus suffering and how that relates to your book. What I would recommend: smile as much as you can. Period. All day, every day, for the rest of your life, and especially when you're writing your book, right? And especially when things are rough. And it doesn't mean you have to have maniacal clown smile, not at all, but just a little, a little bit of turning up of the mouth because we obviously we laugh when we're happy, we smile when we're happy, right? But we also become happier, our minds lighten when we smile. So you can give yourself that neurobiological feedback loop. So a little smile, breathing, relaxing forward, like we said earlier in the conversation. And just hurry up and get it done, but don't rush.
Yeah. I love that. Where can people find all of the things that you're up to?
Thank you. Influencewithaheart.com is probably the easiest central place. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, but influencewithaheart.com will get you everywhere. So come visit, come check it out, and feel free to reach out for a conversation. Happy to support you. If I can help you directly, great. If I can point you to another wonderful person who can help you with your book, great. Because either way, your book gets into the world, and the more good books are in the world, the better the world becomes.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Ben. That was such a beautiful way to end it. I
Thanks.
appreciate you.